Greetings, barbecue family. Welcome to another live episode of the Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ Podcast. I'm your host, Kenyatta Robinson. Thank you for tuning in and spending a little bit of time with me during what I consider to be the best hour of the week. It's the hour where we get to talk about barbecue and chop it up. So last episode, it wasn't last week, but 2 weeks ago, we did an episode, How to Barbecue When You're Away from Home, and gave you some practical advice and recommendations on how to make sure to equip yourself well when you are barbecuing away from the house. So if you didn't get a chance to watch it or watch the replay, make sure you check it out. It's available on YouTube as well as you should be able to find it on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Today, we're going to get into the fact that there's no shortage of barbecue gadgets out there, but not everything necessarily lives up to the hype. Don't believe the hype. So today I'm pulling back the curtain on some of the most overhyped tools in the barbecue world, or at least some that I thought of right off the cuff. And we're going to show you what actually works. And as we go through this, I always invite you all to please jump into the comments. Let me know if there are some barbecue gadgets that maybe you regret or wish you had not had purchased. Put them in the comments. Let's all share that information so we can be a little better, more prudent about the decisions that we make, because it is really easy to get carried away with just the plethora of different gadgets and tools that are available, for us to partake in. Now, before we jump too far into it, I always like to and want to acknowledge the folks who are tuning in live. Always appreciate your participation in the comments. So let's see who we've got online with us already. Greetings to correctional Greetings to Correctional Officer for Lockdown. Hey, Bruce. Always good to see you. And also, shout out to Jeff. Appreciate both of you. Both of you guys are members of both the free Backyard SmokeMaster Society as well as our kind of leveled up insider group, the Backyard Inner Circle. So definitely appreciate you guys for coming in. And Bruce is letting us know that it's time. He's going to do what I believe is going to be his first brisket. So there it is. He's committed to it. In the comments, I'm putting it out here live on the podcast world. Bruce is going to tackle that brisket on Sunday. So congrats to you, Bruce, for taking that leap. I always say that I think of the taking that voyage with the brisket is kind of like the Super Bowl of barbecue. So just remember, take your time, be patient, don't get overwhelmed. I know it's a big cut of meat. It's going to take a long time. So give yourself plenty of liquids, refreshments, and patience. Try to plan it out as best you can. And also, once you get through that long cook, very important, make sure you let that brisket rest. Now, I used to be of the opinion that you needed to let it rest at least 3 or 4 hours, but I've been seeing some guys doing these videos now, and some of them are talking about, if my brisket is on the smoker for 12 hours, I'm going to try and let it rest for 12 hours. Now, I haven't tried that yet, but I do, now that I have a commercial grade food warmer, my next brisket, I am going to try that. So very important. I'd say at least, give yourself 2 or 3 hours minimum, for the rest. resist the temptation to slice into it prematurely. You need to give that meat fibers to settle down. It'll be even more juicy and more tender. So definitely looking forward to hearing how that went for you, Bruce. We also have Montana Kev. Good evening to you. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you. And can't forget our friend from the swamp down in South Florida, Steinborn, is in the chat. So very happy to see all of you. And again, as we go through tonight's topic, if you guys have any questions, barbecue related, any comments, it can be about tonight's topic or anything else, definitely feel free to put them into the comments because, as I say all the time, your comments are really the engine that drives this show. So I do appreciate it. Okay, so again, we're going to get into some of the most overhyped barbecue tools. So let's start off. First off, don't get fooled by the flash. Most of us are probably, we're on our phone for part of the day. And inevitably, at some point, you might be getting into social media or what have you. And then at another point, maybe you go and, you look up some barbecue gadget. And inevitably, what happens, I'm not saying that they're listening and watching what we're doing, but I do know that they have technology, these cookies that kind of, help publicize, what we're interested in. And then inevitably we start seeing some things in our feed that, the marketers think that we will be interested in. And what happens is you end up, kind of getting bombarded with some nice new offerings related to barbecue, some shiny toys or promises of things that will make you be a better pitmaster. So we have to learn, what is the difference between kind of these, what I would call like a must-have gadget, and then what's just marketing fluff. I think a good rule of thumb is kind of like that old saying, if it looks and sounds too good to be true, it probably is. There really are no shortcuts to great barbecue. A lot of it has to do with patience and planning. So, if you're seeing some things that, just look like they may not necessarily be on the up and up, resist that temptation, to jump in and necessarily just partake in it. Remember, it's about the cook and not the gadgets. Let me see. I saw a couple more. Well, at least I saw another comment from Bruce come up. Let me see. So Bruce says, I had a fire flare up on my wooden deck last year, and the so-called flame-resistant grill mat was engulfed in flames. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Promises of, a flame-resistant grill mat. And don't worry, Bruce. I've been there too. Matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, can't believe I'm sharing this, but I'm going to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. So a few weeks ago, I was starting my fire as I usually do using a chimney, and I mistakenly put the chimney on top of one of my grill mats, stepped away, and, I don't know if it was a loose ember, maybe a charcoal, something maybe escaping from, the chimney. But yeah, my grill mat was up in flames, and, just tried to stay calm and got that put out, before it was a total disaster out there. But yeah, I can easily see, promises of a flame resistant grill mat, not holding up when you really need it to. So have to take those types of claims with a grain of salt. All right, let's get back into this. So let's start to look at some of these tools that are what I think are overhyped. And actually, I think as I go through this list, I'm going to find that I think I have bought all five of these things, I must admit. So, first on my list here, electric charcoal fire starters. And so what I have found, and I even did a video. I don't think the video that I did, and this was a few years ago, I don't think it was totally about the or the fire starter, but I think it was like it was a sponsored video. Like this company sent it to me, and it works well. And totally in a certain situations, I think there's a place for it, but it's not something that I would use necessarily for every one of my cooks. And ultimately, just doing it the old fashioned way with a chimney starter is just as effective because I didn't find that the electric charcoal starter got the job any faster. As a matter of fact, it took longer. It took longer because all it really did was just blow out a lot of hot air, right? And it just took time. It took a longer time, than just getting a chimney, filling it with some charcoal, get a fire starter, light up the fire starter, and then, give it 15, 20 minutes for those coals to ash over. Much faster, much more efficient, and less expensive as well. So that was, that's a lesson learned. So, resist the temptation to get an electric charcoal starter. Okay. Meat claws. And yes, I have these too. And when I first started getting into barbecue and did my first pork butts, I had these meat claws that I was using, to shred the butt at the end of the cook. Common sense, I should have just known. Common sense tells you you don't need that. Your pork butt is already going to be super tender. All you need, I mean, I put on here, all you really need is maybe you need a fork, but I think just just get some heavy duty gloves, to protect your hands from the heat. And you may not necessarily even need the fork. You can just use your hands and shred that pork. And to me, it's even more satisfying to do it that way. So I think the meat claws are not necessary at all. Okay. Rib racks. Yes, I have these too. And it always looks and seems like a good idea, when you're in the store and you're thinking, yeah, I can get these rib racks and, I can maximize the amount of space and get, 3 or 4 racks onto my smoker. I say, only use the rib racks if you're really in a pinch and maxed out on space. But otherwise, just lay your ribs down, naturally on the grill grates, or if you've got a drum, hang them in the drum. I think rib racks are also overrated. Let me see. Now, Jeff said with regard to the meat claws, yeah, laugh out loud on those meat claws. All right, let's get back to it. Next up on the list, pellet tube smokers. This seemed to be one that I thought was really kind of got like there was a trend where it seemed like they were really popular a few years back, or at least they were really being pushed a lot. I think mostly when people were starting to maybe, thinking about moving away from gas grills. They were being promoted as a way to provide smoke on a gas grill. And then, pellet smokers were also kind of getting a bad rap initially that, they weren't necessarily putting out enough smoke flavor. So the recommendations were, was to get like a pellet tube smoker. Okay, yes, they work. yes, they can add some smoke flavor, especially if you're using a gas grill. I'm going to say, though, if you really want smoke flavor, the gas grill just ain't it. We've talked about this a lot, and I know Meathead, who came on the podcast a month or two ago, is a big proponent of gas grills because he likes the control factor, that they're just so easy to control. But I guess I'm not sold. In my, heart of hearts, I still believe, if you're really looking for smoke flavor, then you really need to be learning how to cook with charcoal. To a lesser extent, you can get the pellet smoker. Yeah, it's not going to be the same smoke intensity as what you're going to get on a charcoal grill, but you can get smoke flavor. And, also, I've used and I'm a proponent of the brand Smokin' Pecan. Their pellets are made from pecan shells. Gives you a little bit more intensity on the smoke flavor. So, there are some things that you can do, but ultimately, I just don't think that the pellet tube smokers, to me, they're just not worth the time and effort. Maybe if you're doing like pure cold smoking, then maybe use a pellet tube smoker. But I just find that to be a very specific use case. All right, let me get back into the comments. Okay, let's see. So we left off on the meat rack. So Jeff gives like a mad cursing emoji for the rib racks. I fell for this one. I bought it, but never used it. Yeah, I think I may have used my rib racks maybe once, and it just didn't. Having you gotta line your ribs up, kind of hope they don't, start to fall down or kind of slope over. I don't know. I didn't think that it was particularly worth the effort, and I don't think it really adds a whole lot. And then that one hurts. He says, "Oh, with regard to the pellet tube smoker." Jeff says, "I just bought a smoke tube to boost smoke on my pellet smoker." Okay, well, you already got it. So, one, let's see if you actually use it, because I kind of think it might be similar to your experience with the rib racks. I think when it really comes push to shove, you may not necessarily want to take that extra effort, in loading up the tube smoker and then lighting it, because it's not a super meticulous process, but it is a little bit of a process. Like, it's not the same as just you know load your pellets, um, press the button to start the pellet smoker, and then you're off and going. So it's a few more steps involved when you're using the pellet uh, smoking tube. So give it a shot. Definitely try it out, especially since you've already got it. And I'm sure it'll add. It'll add a little something, maybe. But give it a shot. I think it's at least worth trying. But I suspect that it's going to end up being, one of those accessory gadgets that you just don't use often enough, to make it worthwhile. Okay, correctional officer um, co-signs what Jeff is saying. Says, I'm sort of mixed on rib racks. I've had some pretty decent cooks on them. Okay, well, and if it works, by all means. I mean, this is another thing in barbecue, is that there is no one way to do anything. And, my way doesn't have to be your way. So if it's been working for you, by all means, keep utilizing it. But I know for me, and I think what Jeff is also saying, it's just something we're just not going to be reaching for the rib racks on a regular basis. Okay, and then jumping back in on the uh, smoke boxes. So yeah, smoke. Okay, so this is a little different from the pellet tubes, but yeah, another accessory is wood chip smoke boxes. So correctional officer says he hasn't seen the merit of using those either. Now I've never bought a wood chip smoke box, but I agree with not seeing the merit. First of all, I think wood chips, I mean, that's just kind of a waste. If you're really looking to get some smoke flavor, get the chunks. Don't even bother with the chips, because then you start hearing people talk about with chips, soak them. Um, and right there, when you soak the chips, then you're getting something else. You're not. It's more of a like a steam, yeah, type of byproduct. And then also with the chips, they don't burn long. They ignite pretty quickly. So I just think the wood chips is just that's a kind of a waste. To put it bluntly, so I would say stay clear of the wood chips, and also don't bother with the wood chip smoke box. Don't believe the hype. All right, Senji. I know my daughter will probably recognizes and knows the right way to say it. But he says, I ran out of space for ribs once. I don't have a rack, so I use bamboo skewers to stand them up on their side. Kludgy, almost embarrassing looking, but it worked. There you go. I like that. I like that. Take what you have, come up with a solution, and make it work. So no issues there. All right, Jeff says it's just a tool I haven't needed. I don't cook enough ribs where I didn't have enough space where it would help. Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I am too. I just I think that you can make it work, without having to use a rib rack. I mean, maybe it might get you one additional slab of ribs, but I don't know. Also, the other thing, and I forgot to mention, I don't like how close the ribs are, when they're standing up in the rib rack. I mean, you kind of always hear, pitmasters say that you don't want to overcrowd your smoker, or at least you want to have a little bit of space in between the proteins so that that the smoke can get to them, and I kind of feel like if they're bunched together like that, I think that also um, gives that another that's a complication, that can lessen the ability to really have good smoke on your ribs. I love it. We're going back and forth between the rib racks and the smoker tubes. Maybe we hit some emotional buttons there. So Jeff says, I'll be giving the smoke tube a try. The plan is to use both pellets and chips in the tube to boost the flavor. Okay, okay. Uh, I don't want to be the negative Nancy. I definitely say go with the pellets. I don't know. I guess let me know. I'd love to know how that works out with the chips as well. I don't really see the benefit of using wood chips. I just the way that they burn um, just makes me question the usefulness. But yeah, definitely give it a shot, Jeff, and let us know. Let us know in the inner circle or the Smoke Master Society how that worked out, because I know there's probably some other folks, who would like that information as well. Montana Keb says, I don't have a pellet smoker. Are they considered a true convection cooker like an offset? You know, I don't know off the top of my head. I do think that they are considered to be a convection cooker. Maybe someone in the comments who knows better um, can answer that. Matter of fact, I see Jeff said, yes, I think so. They use a fan to circulate the air in the chamber, right? So I agree. I think that they are considered to be a convection cooker. Um, so I would just say, especially if you're comparing pellet smoker to offset smoker, to me, the big advantage of a pellet smoker is the convenience, the ease of use, and you're staying true to cooking with wood. Okay, you're still cooking with wood, so it's not going to be, and that's the downside. There's just absolutely no way possible. Don't let anyone tell you, try to convince you that you can get the same smoke flavor off of a food cooked with a pellet smoker than you can with an offset smoker. It's just impossible. So that's just not going to happen. But again, ease of use, convenience. Maybe you've worked all day. You come home, you want something, you want some barbecue, you want something cooked outside, but you don't want to have to babysit or you have to work. You don't want to have to work necessarily hard, at the cook. This is where a pellet smoker really, shines through. They're easy to get started. You just punch in the temperature that you want. It does all the work of managing the temperature for you. So they're convenient, they're easy, simple to use. Kind of like the ease of use is similar to like a gas grill, just from an operational standpoint, super easy to use. Downside, just not going to get the same smoke flavor. If you really want true, authentic barbecue, I mean, nothing's going to beat cooking with wood splits, which you do with an offset smoker. Of course, then the downside using an offset smoker is they're the hardest to use. They're going to require the most attention from you and the most time to manage the fire, physically put splits on when one burns out. So it requires the most. Um, so I don't get to use my offset smoker as much as I'd like, even though I'm looking to do it more than I have been. But when I do have the time, it's still my favorite. It's the favorite one that I have out of all my cookers because it's the most rewarding. When you cook on it, and yeah, you just can't beat that authentic wood smoke flavor coming off of a an offset smoker. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a few points to think about. All right, let's see. We left off there rib racks. So next up, so actually that was the rib racks was the fifth one. Got some good chatter on the ones that we brought up, especially the rib racks and the smoker tube. Now this is another one that I think is going to be considered controversial. So it is Bluetooth only thermometers. And now, don't get me wrong, and there are been some advances, in wireless thermometers, and they've come a long, long way. Love my ThermoWorks RFX. I also really like my Fireboard. Oh my God, what is it called? I think it starts with an I, but I forgot the name of it. Probably because I mostly go to my ThermoWorks. I forgot the name of the Fireboard. The Impulse? No, Fireboard Pulse. It's the Fireboard Pulse is the name of it. Kind of in second place for me. And then also Combustion. They make a really good wireless thermometers. So they've come a long way. Love the technology. They usually, these companies are doing a pretty good job with the apps, but I'm including it as something that is, I think, overhyped because it's technology. It can fail, you know, and So that makes them really cool. And you're looking like the cool guy. You're loving life. You're able to check your temperatures remotely, while you're in the house watching TV under the air conditioner. Everything's going good. But then, your thermometer craps out on you mid cook. And that's when the problems come up. So, this is the reason why I do still consider them to be a little bit on the overhyped side and not what I consider to be a must have accessory. I mean, I think instant read thermometers, now, that's more foolproof. You go outside, you just insert that probe, you get a temperature read back, feedback, of the temperature like within a split second. So you get like an instant information on where you are with the cook. They also seem to be really accurate. I mean, I'm not saying that ThermoWorks RFX is not, because ThermoWorks as a company, they've really nailed the accuracy thing down. But I think in terms of just having a foolproof gadget for getting temperature information, instant read is still the best way to go. Bluetooth is more, the wireless is still more of a like a convenience. It's like a luxury. Works great when it works, but it could be that one time. Maybe, Bruce is doing that brisket, and he's in hour number 10, and then, his wireless thermometer craps out and he doesn't know exactly when it crapped out, So now he's really kind of just, that moment of panic sets in. If he's got an instant read thermometer, he can just run out there and, see where things are. But, this is the example, the point that I'm trying to make. So definitely let me know in the comments where you guys are, on that one. Maybe I'm just, off the mark a little bit on that. But would love to know where you guys stand on that one. Okay, so I think we got some more good suggestions here. So, correctional officer says rather than purchase a barbecue journal, one can benefit from regular notebook text. Okay, I'm not quite sure where what you mean by that, but I definitely like the idea. Well, oh, okay, I got you. Instead of buying like a barbecue journal, like something that's branded and that's made specific, hyping it up is this is what you need, to journal your barbecue cooks. You can just get a regular notebook, and just take some notes. I got you. Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, I think a branded barbecue journal is cool. It's cute, but definitely not necessary. And I do highly recommend that you do, take some notes and, having a notebook or something like that that you can easily refer back to what happened in your past cooks is a great idea. Because really, you should be learning and observing new things on every cook that you have. I'm sure there was something that happened during the cook that was like either a revelation to you or maybe something that you thought, okay, this happened, so next time I should do this, just something where you think you can get better. So absolutely, take notes and keep that nearby. Steinborn says, never toss out the accessories from your old barbecues when you trash them. There are so many pieces that come in handy, like the grill grates, etc. That's good advice too. Yeah, definitely see, if you're done with something, if it is something like that has grill grates or what have you, see if there's some parts that can be, that can be repurposed. Absolutely. Correctional officer agrees that you have to space your ribs on the rib racks. And Steinborn says, Rib racks are a sucker draw when you can make all you want any size from wire hangers in your clothes closet. Use foil pans over and over rather than tin foil for your rib wraps. They stay juicier. That's also good advice too. I love the use what you have, what you already have at the ready, and take advantage of that. And yeah, use foil pans rather than tin foil for your rib wraps. Now I'm a proponent of actually not even wrapping your ribs, because I think that kind of changes the way that you cook, that the ribs are cooking inside of that tight foil. So I would definitely advocate for using a foil pan, over wrapping your ribs in aluminum foil. Absolutely. Steinborn says, tip, want more quality smoke on your pellet grill? Do not buy do not buy those. Is that a brand? I guess I got a little bit lost. Maybe that's one that I haven't heard of. Um, so I don't know. Let me know. Is that a brand? And if it is, I guess Steinborn is saying stay clear. Montana Keb says he just did his first rack of St. Louis ribs on his brand new Lone Star grills. I could not believe the difference the smoke flavor was and how much better they tasted than all the other ways I've tried. Okay, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Montana Cav, I believe you have also joined the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe that was you who had messaged me about how you got your new LSG. I think you got the 20 by 42. So you're talking about a stick burner and you're cooking with wood splits. So yeah, absolutely. That's what we're talking about. You just can't beat the barbecue flavor for proteins that are being smoked with real wood splits. They're going to outdo, any charcoal based smoker, definitely any pellet smoker. And then we won't even talk about gas grills. Okay, Steinborn says, do not buy those commercial smoke pots when you can use an old steamer pot with holes in them and just throw a metal lid on top. More sage advice. Use what you've got. You don't have to buy, every single thing, that you see on the internet. Maybe there's some way that you can replicate what they're promising to provide with the things that you already have. Mike says he loves his Lone Star pellet smoker, puts out pretty decent smoke flavor. And that's what I've heard too, about LSG's pellet smoker, consistently putting out a superior smoke flavor, when compared to other pellet smokers. So I don't have experience with one, but I've heard consistently good things about them. Steinborn says smoker tubes are totally useless. Use the old steamer pot that can hold nice sized chunks of real oak or whatever wood you desire. Better flavor. Jeff, okay, I think Jeff agrees with me on my take on the wireless thermometers. Bluetooth is not up to the task unless you're standing next to the grill. Yeah, especially with a good offset that has real steel. Bluetooth does not deal with thick metal. That's a great point. Yeah, if you're cooking with an offset, quarter-inch steel, you can't rely on those Bluetooth, those wireless thermometers to consistently be able to get a signal out, to your phone unless you're standing right next to it. Yeah, that's a really good point. And like I said, all it takes, that one moment, during your long cook, and just kind of throws everything off. Everything off. And Jeff says wireless is awesome, but the ones that use RF perform better than Bluetooth. Yeah, that appears to be a scientifically proven uh, technology point. So yeah, and definitely again, just use caution. If you're dealing with one that is Bluetooth only. Okay, I have a Thermo Pro and it's up to my game. The ambient temperature is accurate. The built-in thermometer is not. Though I would not use a Bluetooth when barbecuing a brisket or anything longer than 4 hours. Another good point. Yeah, a long cook, you're kind of playing with fire. If you're relying only on like a Bluetooth thermometer to monitor your connections. Love it. You guys are really rocking it in the comments. Montana Cab says, I have used the Meter brand Bluetooth device, and just as you were talking, yeah, the damn things crap out on you. I've bought the Fireboard now and have the Pulse unit with it. Still getting used to it though. Yeah, I would say the Fireboard Pulse is a definite upgrade over Meter. Anyone who has watched um, prior podcasts know that I've had some critical things to say about Meter and their wireless thermometers. I know they were kind of like the first to market, or one of the first, and kind of they really got their name out there. But and I trust me, I bought a lot of their products and ultimately was let down by all of them. So I'm just going to leave that there. And then Steinborn, okay, so he's clarifying the brand that he's talking about is, I don't know how to say that, Thoiz. And Steinborn was saying, stay clear. Stay clear. Okay, let's move on. So let's see. Next, before I move on, in case you haven't noticed or haven't done it yet, you see at the bottom of the screen, there's a little scrolling message there about the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. It is now free, so there's really no reason not to join. Just go to backyardsmokemaster.com/society. And it's a lot like how it is here on this podcast, where we're lively in the comments. The discussions can get lively there too. And you're free to, post on any barbecue related topic. You don't have to wait on me to ask a question or pose something. If there's something on your mind about barbecue and you want to pick some guy's brains about it, that is the place to do it. You do not have to go through this alone, and we're all better together. So definitely invite you to check out the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. I hope to see you over there. Okay, let's get into this. So some underrated tools that do deliver, and we've already been talking about this. Instant read thermometers are at the top of my list. And I consistently say, if there's like one, if there's like the first barbecue accessory that you should get, I consistently say that you should have an instant read thermometer. And you don't have to get one of the real expensive ones. ThermoWorks makes a great one. I've got a couple of those. But you can go on Amazon and you can get a good instant read thermometer in the $20 range, and it will serve you extremely well. So don't sleep on instant read thermometers. Also, just from a food safety standpoint, you want to make sure you are monitoring the internal temperature of the food that you're preparing. Make sure that you're cooking to food safe temperatures. You don't want to get anyone sick. And there's no excuse to be guessing around, what the temperature is. Use an instant read thermometer and you will know, and keep everybody safe and happy. Okay. Another underrated tool heat resistant gloves. And we've talked about this on the podcast many times as well. But those are also, we don't necessarily think about them. You can get like kind of like the cotton gloves. You put those on, and then you put the disposable gloves on top of them, the nitrile. If you just need to get in there and move your meat around or grab the meat off of the smoker, the grill, and it's really hot, so you want to protect your hands. So those are good to have as well. Charcoal basket. So if you're cooking on a charcoal based grill, this is a good way to make better, more efficient use of your charcoal. Get the baskets. Kick Ash Basket, they make a lot of fantastic baskets customized for many of the popular charcoal based grills that are out there on the market. And there are a ton of others to choose from. Highly recommend a good charcoal basket as well if your grill didn't already come with one. And then grill grates. Grill grates are a fantastic accessory, especially if you're trying to do some high temperature grilling. If the sear marks are your thing, grill grates will help you achieve that. But maybe even better, flip the grill grates over, use the flat side, and then you're gonna get like a better sear. Not necessarily the sear marks, but instead you're gonna get a nice, good sear, good crust over the full surface of your meat. So grill grates are a fantastic accessory. And then also mesh racks. Those are also good depending on what you're cooking. Those also come in handy. I'm thinking I always use like some mesh racks, like when I'm doing pork belly burnt ends. They're a great way to, get the cut slices of belly together, season them. The mesh allows the smoke to still penetrate them, and it makes it easier to transport the food. So that's another really good one. Let me know in the comments if there are some other tools that maybe I'm missing. So definitely let us know what you guys are thinking. But here's one. Whereas I think you should absolutely have an instant read thermometer, go out and get yourself, and I think it was Steinborn that was talking about foil pans. Make sure you've got some foil pans at the ready. They're versatile and you can use them for a lot of things. You can use them as drip pans to help make to catch the drippings and make the cleanup inside of your grill or smoker a lot easier. You can use them for serving sides. When you're finished with your cook, you can take your meat, you can throw them in the aluminum pan. They have lots of uses. They don't cost much. So I would say, in addition to having a good instant read thermometer, everyone should have aluminum pans at the ready as well. All right. All right, let's see. Where did we leave off? So we got an endorsement for the ThermoWorks RFX wireless thermometer. We got correctional officer welcoming Montana Kev, and congrats on the recent cook. Yeah, I think, Montana. Again, welcome again, if I didn't say it already, to the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, and congrats on that 20 by 42 Lone Star grills. I've got one, and that was, for me, that was like my signature barbecue acquisition. When I got serious about barbecue and I kind of gotten my feet wet with some charcoal based grills, big on my list, on my bucket list, was wanting to get an offset smoker, and this was 7 years ago. Did a lot of research on different smokers that were out there, different fabricators, and landed on LSG. And right when I placed my initial order, they announced the 20-inch series. I switched my order to the 20 by 42, and that was definitely the right decision for me at that time. And I have no regrets about making that purchase. So I know that you will enjoy your 20 by 42. Just, cook on it. Cook on it, observe what happens, take notes, remember what happens. I don't know if you have experience. I think you may have mentioned that you have cooked on maybe it was an Oklahoma Joe, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know. If you don't have a lot of experience, cooking on an offset, know that there is a learning curve with fire management. But you do have experience, and maybe with something, I don't know, that isn't necessarily as solidly built as the LSG. I think you will find your cooking experience will be a lot easier on something like an LSG, because with it being built with that 1/4 inch steel, you won't be subject to a whole lot of wild, unpredictable temperature fluctuations. So again, congrats on that acquisition. Okay, newer generation Bluetooth thermometer has a base station that gives you triple the distance. Yeah, those are the claims. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Um, yeah, I'm sure they consistently get better. They consistently get better. Um, I can't say whether or not, you know, those claims don't necessarily hold true, but I do have to look at it with a little bit of skepticism. So I don't want to be the hater, but I've been dabbling with these Bluetooth thermometers for a long time, and I've observed some things. I've observed some things. All right, Steinborn says, cut down on wasting precious coal waste by stop igniting your fire with a chimney starter. Just put your charcoal pile in the pit, and the tumbleweed will be just as effective and not waste energy. Okay, that's a good, interesting point too. Now, I am an advocate for using. Well, okay, yeah, I like to use a chart the chimney starter. Let me put that back up. And Steinborn is saying, stop igniting with the chimney starter. Just, yeah, so I think he's saying just, load up your charcoal inside of your firebox, or like maybe if it's a Weber Summit Kamado, and I've done this too, where you can just, load up your charcoal, and then you can get the fire started with the tumbleweed, or, whatever inside, right there inside of the smoker. And that's another way to get your fire going. So I don't disagree with that. But again, I do both. And maybe because I do a lot of cooks with my stick burner as well. So I know my chimney starter is a great way to get a fire started in my LSG. I mean, I might look at some other ways to get the fire started. I see a lot of people using, what do you call those? Weed burners. I mean, man, they look like they're using a lot of energy from what I can tell. But I like this suggestion from Steinborn that you can absolutely get your fire started right there inside of the smoker. All right, Jeff co-signs the instant read thermometer as that being a critical accessory. Okay, we got a question. In your experience, do you get erroneous ambient temperature readings when using the meter? If my pit is running at 250 degrees, the meter is always averaging a good 50 to 60 degrees under. That is a good question. I don't I don't necessarily, why no, I don't have the exact answer to this question, but let me give you my theory. My theory is that, well, obviously, the meter or any other wireless thermometer that you insert into your meat and it's also giving you an ambient temperature reading, it's going to be giving you the ambient temperature based on its location, which might only be an inch or two above the meat, from where you inserted your meat. So I think that might be the biggest reason why at that particular location, inside of your cooking chamber, why there's a big difference between the temperature reading that the meter is giving you and maybe the built-in thermometer, or or maybe if you're using another tool to measure the ambient temperature inside of your smoker. So that might be the explanation for that. And as I think about it, and that's also, I think, another reason why I think ThermoWorks took an interesting approach with the RFX, whereas it seems like all the other wireless thermometers measure the ambient temperature with the one thermometer that you insert. ThermoWorks took the approach of not having the wireless thermometer measure the ambient temperature, but they include in the box a separate ambient temperature probe that you fasten with a clip, onto the surface, or, onto the grill grate to measure the temperature. And so I think maybe that's why they took that approach, or at least part of the reason. So a different approach that probably does give a more accurate, ambient temperature reading. So I don't know. Maybe you guys have other theories on that. Definitely put them into the comments, but that's my best guess. Now, Steinborn, let's see. Okay. Is it Cindy? I'm going to call you Cindy G. I hope that's right. Anyway, you're saying, Steinborn, I have the same issue with my ThermoPro versus the gauge on the grill. Put the meter in your kitchen oven. Mine is plus or minus 2 degrees to what I set the oven to. And that seems fair. That seems fair. And I haven't been paying attention, to meters claims of late, but I suspect that they probably would say that their accuracy is within, plus or minus 2 degrees. That seems pretty fair and reasonable. Okay, Jeff has a theory. Jeff says the problem with the ambient temperature reading I found on the meter was it's too slow. It doesn't keep up with the grill. It can give an accurate reading, but can't keep up with fluctuations. That's an interesting point, too. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, maybe the meter is just relaying that information back, and it's a delay, that is causing there to be a significant difference. So that could very well be it. Okay, another suggestion from Steinborn. If you are disposing of old toaster ovens, interesting, those racks are super handy because they are the perfect size and usually perfect for grilling use for so many things. All right, well, that's a good, interesting point. Question: what do you guys think of the topic of grill brushes and how they can leave residue on your grates? Like wire splinters and such. Okay, so absolutely with grill brushes, please, please, please do not buy the ones that have the wire, kind of the wire bristles. This is a critical safety issue, and I wish that these things would be outlawed. Or if you get one, only use it, to maybe scrape off like your charcoal grates. But anything that comes into contact with your food, any of those grates, do not use one of those wired bristles. Just as you pointed out, those bristles can break off. They're really small, really fine. You probably won't notice it. They can end up in your food, and someone can get seriously harmed if they swallow it. So I can't stress that enough. Please stay clear of that. Go with I don't know, maybe something with a nylon bristles. I know there are some like steaming brushes. Um, I'm not quite sure of the material that they're using, but it's like something that will take the heat inside of your smoker. You add water, and it gives like a steaming effect. So I think that can be a more effective way to keep your grill grates clean. But yeah, I can't emphasize that point enough. Please do stay clear of the wired brushes. KB Barbecue says beer. Just kidding. Aluminum sheet pans and heavy duty foil. Yeah, those are great to have. So totally, I think every cook, you should have those types of materials available. Okay. Steinborn says, if you can remove your grills and throw them on the grass and take a hose and soap with an old long floor brush, presto, you get clean grills, no contamination. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are definitely a lot of different ways, to clean your grill grates. And, who can argue with good old fashioned soap and water, right? Can't go wrong with that as well. Let's see. Jeff says, I can't say I worry too much about the brush, but I try to buy good quality brushes, stay away from the cheap ones. A simple barbecue apron is fine with me too. I love those nice leather ones, but a simple cotton grill apron with pockets works well for me. That's good practical advice. I have to admit, I just recently bought like a leather apron, very well built. So I'm gonna use that sucker. But I can't disagree. I can't disagree. Um, Functionally, yeah, a simple cotton grill. And I do think the pockets are important. So a lot of times, we get these giveaway kind of aprons, maybe at a football or baseball game, with your team logo on it. But, they don't have any pockets, so they're not functional. I mean, it just might, help protect your clothes a little bit. But I think you really do at least needs to have something with some pockets so you can, have your instant read thermometer, and maybe a towel and some other things. Absolutely. Okay, this one's critically important. Correctional officer reminds everyone to make sure you hit the like button. Please do. Also, share the podcast and tell a friend about us. If you've got a buddy that's into barbecue, this is what we do most every Friday at the same time. We're on here chopping it up, sharing tips with each other, trying to get better at barbecue. So, absolutely, please do make sure that you hit the like button. All right, let me see. Next up, barbecue regrets. So, put this into the comments. What is the most overrated barbecue tool that you've ever bought? So, which one do you really, really wish you had not bought? You had not bought. Please do put that into the comments. So, yeah, I'll go first. I think my biggest regret is I bought a number of barbecue fans. So I know that was kind of another really hot thing, and they're still pretty popular, because people want to have like the automatic temperature control. Um, so you can buy like a fan, and connect it to um, like another device that's going to monitor the temperature. And then the whole idea is that the device or your app You set the temperature that you want, the temperature, the ambient temperature inside of your cooker to be, and then the fan, in conjunction with the app or whatever the device is, will do the work of adjusting the amount of oxygen that's coming into the fire, the firebox, to adjust the temperature, and it does all that for you. Love, love, love the concept, and many of them do work great. I think, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this isn't a good accessory to buy. I don't think it's a must-have accessory. I think this kind of falls in the kind of nice to have luxury bucket. But if you do get one, I would say, to me, they're best on charcoal based cookers. Um, I don't think you need one on a really efficient cooker like the Summit Kamado, Weber Summit Kamado, but maybe on like a Kamado Joe, a Big Green Egg, Acorn, those types of cookers, um, Weber kettle or other kettles, maybe they can be good for that. Where they are really absolutely unnecessary, and this is the reason why it's my biggest regret, is one of the big things that I wanted to do when I bought my Lone Star Grill's offset smoker was I wanted to make sure that it had the ability for me to add a fan to it. So that was like an add-on. I mean, the thing already was pretty expensive, and then you can customize and add some things. Kind of, that's like another topic for another day. Like which add-ons to the Lone Star grills are necessary and which ones are kind of like fluff or unnecessary. But one of the ones that I was really hyper focused on was making sure that it had the ability for me to add a fan, because I wasn't confident about my ability to manage the temperatures on my own, and I thought a fan would make that much easier for me. So when I first got my LSG, I got a I got a big powerful fan that I could connect to it. Um, and yeah, initially was trying to learn how to manage fires in conjunction or by using it with the fan. And it just proved to be a complete waste of time and money, because what I found was, A, even with the fan, I still had to get up every 40, 45 minutes to put a new split on. And then the other thing that I realized was the wood is just going to burn the way it's going to burn. So having that fan blowing more air on it, wasn't really helping things at all. I think it was also in conjunction with me being too obsessive about trying to have the exact temperature. Okay, I want to smoke these ribs at 225, so I want everything to be, like between 220 and 230, just kind of giving me this really narrow range, and I wanted to stay exactly at 225. All of that obsessing and trying to keep it at that exact temperature and relying on the fan, total waste of time. And I really truly didn't feel like I started to get good at fire management on a stick burner until I ditched the fan and just learned how to observe the way wood splits naturally, finding the cadence. I found that they typically last, an average split on an LSG typically would last about 40, 45 minutes, give or take, and just kind of getting used to that rhythm, giving myself more headroom with the temperature, not obsessing about trying to be exactly at 225 or 250. I learned that the LSD kind of, at least mine, kind of just likes to be around 240, just on average, likes to be 235, 240, and being fine if at some point it's going to be, 250, 260, even 275. And some points it's going to drop down, to around 225, 220. And knowing that when it does get around 220, that's the perfect time to add a new split. So just kind of learning and letting it go natural, not relying on the fan, the gadgets, and just doing it the old-fashioned way. So that's my story. Now let me get into the comments and see what you guys have in terms of your biggest regrets. Let's see. And maybe this may not necessarily be a regret, but I'm just kind of going through where we left off in the comments. So I purchased a barbecue cover to go with my Oklahoma Joe. I never opened the box. I wheel my grill in and out of my garage. That's another one. I bought this super expensive, I waited for Lone Star Grills to come out with their custom made cover for my LSG. And this thing is heavy, expensive. So when they did come out with it, I was one of the first to buy it. I used it for a little bit and then I realized that I'm just making this way harder on myself. Taking that thing on and off was a chore, a waste of time. So I still have the cover, haven't used it in years. I mean, like I said, I've had my LSG for 7 years. I probably haven't used the cover. It's probably been at least 5 years. I mean, at one point, I kind of stopped using it, but then when it got to be like the rainy season, I would put it on. But now I don't even bother with that. I just try to season the outside of the smoker every now and then when it looks like it. Just use like a food grade white mineral oils, what I've been using. But trying to keep it covered, that just proved to be waste of time, and I wish I could get that money back. So thank you for that one, because that just reminded me of my own experience. Steinborn says, lesson learned, as I said, use those old discarded trays from old toaster ovens that are metal and slotted and come in all sizes for jobs just like that. And Steinborn says, barbecue covers. That's what Harbor Freight is for. Cheap and useful. I've never ordered from Harbor Freight, but I keep seeing their name come up. For instance, I've been thinking that I might need to buy a new, like a, what do you call it? Like like a vacuum that's capable of sucking up ashes. I don't know why I'm having a brain lock. Shop vac, like a shop vac. And I've been hearing that maybe Harbor Freight is the place that I should look. So that's good to know that they are also good for cheap and reasonably priced barbecue covers. Bungee cords and tarps works well to cover your grills. I would agree with that too. Now, the tarp, I hadn't really thought about the bungee cord, but yeah, that makes sense to help lock it down. Because my first thought was with tarp, especially when it gets windy, they're going to kind of blow away and leave your grills partially exposed. But I think maybe with the bungee cords, that makes sense to help lock that down. So that's another good recommendation. Well, all right, guys. Again, I do appreciate a good, lively discussion. Appreciate all the comments and the suggestions. Again, this is what we do inside of the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. Again, it's free. No excuse not to join. Scan the QR code that you see on the screen or go to backyardsmokemaster.com/society and jump right in, and let's keep the conversation going all week long. So definitely invite you to do that. All right, our next live show a week from today, Friday, August 8th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central, 10 Eastern Time. So thank you all. Again, I really do appreciate everyone, correctional officer, Steinborn, Senny G, if I'm saying that right, Montana Kev, Jeff. Let's see, we also heard from, KB Barbecue, My friend Tracy said hi. Thank you, Tracy. So I hope I covered everyone. But again, appreciate you all for spending some time joining us live. That really does, again, your comments are the engine that makes the show go. So hope to see you next week. Hope to see you inside of the society. Get out there, enjoy your grills and smokers, and I will see you soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.